Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Writing in the chat box doesn't ensure that you are there in the class. So I take snapshots from the list of the attendees, like I have already mentioned. But someday, like I and even Fiza ma'am, we both randomly, call names. So in that case, if somebody is not responding, it could be anyone, of course. We can't call everybody's name on a single day. It could be anyone, and if they are not responding, then in the last class, one or two students did not respond when I took their name. So it means that they have not attended the class. Only marking their names and joining is not enough. And we have assigned 5 marks for the class participation and attendance and your involvement and your how well you are participating and responding in the class. So please remember that also, that 5 marks are attached to it. Assalamu alaikum, ma'am.
Hello.
Ji ma'am, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamualaikum. Yes. So Zareen, how's everything?
Fine, ma'am. Thank you,
We
ma'am.
have we
Ji,
have sufficient number of students. I think 66, around 65.
ma'am. Ji,
Can we start now?
ji ma'am, please, please.
Okay. Um, so what are we going to discuss today? I think so from what we recollect, we have discussed motivation, right? And we have also discussed before that perception and personality. So we are discussing all primarily individual variables that impact behavior. How motivation, is important, perception is important, personality, all that we have discussed. So today I think we would be discussing again a related concept, which is learning. We'll be discussing as to what exactly we mean by learning, and why learning is an important behavioral construct, why it is important. So I'll discuss what exactly learning means in the context of organizational behavior. Let me know if you are able to see the slide.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now, what is learning? Learning is, to understand it as a simple concept, learning is whatever we imbibe from the environment. I mean, for example, if you read a book, you learn something out of it. You read a newspaper, you get to know something. So learning is anything that we get to know, anything that we imbibe from the environment. And technically, when we talk about learning in organizational context, we say learning leads to some kind of change in your behavior. So you get to know something, you acquire some information, you acquire some knowledge, and that information and knowledge leads to some change in your behavior. When that happens, we say learning has taken place. So as a result of having got to know something, as a result of having acquired some information, uh, my behavior towards something may change, or in general my behavior may change. That is called as learning. So it involves change. Some kind of change is there in my behavior because of what I have got to know from the environment. So it's a relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of experience. It's relatively permanent because it stays with us at least for some time, and so there is some kind of behavioral change. So this is what basically learning, summarily means. Learning is understanding something from the environment, getting to know something from the environment, some experience, something, and then a change in your behavior as a result of that experience. So this is what learning is. Now, learning is a very, very important concept in organizations, because organizations are constantly trying to make people learn. They are trying to make people learn what is desirable, what is not desirable, what they have to do, what they don't have to do, what is to be the tasks that have to be carried out, the activities that have to be done. So people have to constantly learn in an organization. They have to constantly keep changing, understanding things, and then keep changing themselves, keep changing behavior. So it's a very, very important concept. So we need to know what exactly we can do to make people learn desirable behaviors, because every organization has a certain way of working. Every organization has certain principles. Every organization has certain standards. And we want people to work as per those principles. We want people to work as per those standards, as per those guidelines, policies, whatever. So we have to make people learn those guidelines. We have to make people learn those policies, those standards, so that they work as per those standards. So their behavior, changes as per the standards and policies and guidelines of the organization. So constantly we have to make people learn. So we'll be discussing in this section as to how learning takes place and what organizations do in order to make people learn. So we just now saw that learning is some kind of change, a behavioral change that takes place because of having acquired some information. Now, so the important question is that how do people learn? How will they learn? I mean, is there a method to it? Is there a process that we have to follow to make people learn? How do we make people learn? So there are two prominent, we can say, theories or two prominent points of view which describe how people learn. So there are two dominating perspectives. Now, there's one perspective which says that learning is a natural process. People will learn naturally. It's an autonomous process. Every day we observe things, we experience things, and then somewhere something is happening inside us. We just learn that, okay, this is like this, and this is what we have to do. So it's an autonomous, natural learning which is taking place. There's a second perspective which says no, learning is conscious. It's a deliberate process. It's not so natural or autonomous. It's an intentional process. It is deliberate. People have to be made to learn. They will not learn by themselves. So the first perspective says that people will learn by themselves. So you can see the changing slides, right?
Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay, okay. Right. So learning mechanism, that is what we are discussing now. how people learn. So there's one point of view which says that people will learn by themselves, naturally, autonomously, and there's another point of view which says no, we learn through some conscious effort. There is something deliberate which is done. There's something intentional which is done, and then we learn as that by that process. So there are two very prominent theories which I think we already, most of you would know, because you must have read about these theories somewhere in some context. So I'll just quickly touch upon what these theories are. There's this classical learning theory, classical conditioning theory of Ivan Pavlov, which is a very important psychology theory which has been taught for years in classes in psychology, organizational behavior, management theories. So it's a very, very prominent theory. It's a simple theory, but it explains how people learn. It is basically based on the first perspective that I just now discussed. Learning is natural, it is autonomous, it happens by itself, it is through a reflex action. So it says that it's a learning is like a conditioning process. People observe something consciously, subconsciously, whatever, and through that they, they learn things. So it is not very deliberate, it is not very conscious. It is just through some kind of conditioning that we get to know that okay, this is what is how things have to be done. And there's this simple, the very popular experiment that you must have probably known, that you know about, or you must have read about, this experiment on the dog that was done by Ivan Pavlov and his team. And they were looking at how this dog would behave if it got conditioned to something. So what happened was that there was this dog, and who was the subject of the experiment, and the experimenters would ring a bell and give a piece of meat to the dog at the same time when they were ringing the bell. So day one, they rang the bell and then they gave food to the dog. Day two, again, they did the same thing. They rang the bell and gave food. They repeated this process for several days. Now, what happened was that the dog got conditioned to this idea that if the bell is ringing, it means there will be food which will be offered. So the mind just got conditioned. We say it's a reflex action. It just got conditioned. After some time, after a few days, after repeating this process, after a few days, the experimenters just rang the bell and they did not give food to the dog. And yet they saw that the dog would start salivating, even just by hearing the sound of the bell. So there was no food given. But whenever the bell was rung, the dog thought that maybe because the food time is there, it's lunchtime. So the dog would start naturally salivating on ringing the bell. So the ringing of the bell was associated with food or lunchtime by the dog, and the dog would naturally start, feeling hungry and salivating and so on. So it was a type of conditioning, which is, we say it's a reflex action. Our mind gets conditioned. Um, and we start relating something to something else, and that is how we start responding, that is how we start behaving. So the dog started salivating. So it was an unconditional stimulus, which was the meat, but and an unconditioned response, which is natural. The dog would salivate if meat is given. But the conditioned stimulus was that there was a bell which was rung with the meat. So the dog got conditioned. It's an artificially created stimulus that we are creating. The dog got conditioned that bell means meat, it means food. So the conditioned response after some days was salivation only on hearing the bell, even if meat was not offered. So this is what happens with us also. It's our learning is a conditioned response. We start building an association between something and something else, and we start behaving that this is how things will be. So it is passive. This kind of learning is passive. We react to certain events because we know that they are going to behave, be in a certain way, and so we start reacting in that same manner. It's a simple reflex action. It's a simple learned behavior which is subconsciously there. It is not very deliberate, but it's a subconsciously learned behavior. For example, a child touches a hot iron and burns his finger, and the next time the child will be scared to touch even a cold iron, because his mind has been conditioned that iron would be hot and it would burn his finger. So it's a reflex action. It's a reflex action of your mind. This is how we learn. A lot of things we learn like this only. When a child is born and that child grows up, there are a lot of things that the child just learns. The child is not told everything, but the child grows up and learns a lot of things just by, himself or herself. That is a reflex learning. It is autonomous learning. It is natural learning. The same thing happens in organizations also. There are a lot of things that might not be written down, that might not be told to employees, but they just learn because they see that every day. And so they learn that this is what we have to do. So, for example, if an employee is observing that the boss is very punctual and he comes to the office on time every day, so even if the boss doesn't say anything on punctuality, the employees, working under them would be conscious that because he is punctual, he might get angry or whatever. So they will also try to be punctual. They will just follow that. So they just learn that. So this is what is, in a way, something which is just by observing, we get to know that this is how things are, and through reflex action, we just start behaving in that manner. So this is classical conditioning, the traditional conditioning theory, the autonomous learning theory, which says that learning is more natural, it is more autonomous, it just happens. But not all learning is natural. Not all learning is autonomous. Sometimes people have to be made to learn. A child has to be made to learn certain things. And this is what the operant conditioning theory talks about. It says that no, we have to make people learn. It's a conscious process. B.F. Skinner, the person behind operant conditioning, says that learning is a conscious process. It's a deliberate process. It's not autonomous, it's voluntary. You have to make people learn. So in organizations also, we have to make people learn. Either we reward them or we punish them or we do something, but we have to have a conscious strategy of making people learn, and that is how people will learn what they have to do and what they should not do and how they should behave and how they should work. It will not be autonomous, it will not be all natural. It is conscious. That is what the operant conditioning theory says, that we have to reinforce pleasant behaviors and pleasant consequences. So you have to do something consciously. In the organization, you have to take up conscious efforts. You have to design conscious strategies to make people learn. So behavior will be reinforced. Positive behavior has to be reinforced. Negative behavior has to be stopped. And all this has to be properly planned and done in an organization. So this is what the operant conditioning theory says, that we have to make people learn. Learning will not take place naturally. Now, when we talk about organizations, actually, both kinds of learning take place. In real life, also, both kinds of learning take place. Look at these examples. For example, it says that Simon eats a new food and then gets sick because of flu. Not because of that food, because of flu. However, he develops a dislike for the food because he thinks I got sick due to the food. It was not because of the food, it was because of something else. But because immediately after eating the food, he had some problem, so he starts relating that food with his sickness. So every time he sees the food in future, he starts nauseating and having vomiting or whatever, feeling sick, because he starts linking that food with that sickness. So this is what classical conditioning is. This is something that happens with all of us. So, we have something that we start relating. So the flu sickness is unconditioned stimulus. The nausea was a unconditioned response. Simple. But the food, because I started associating the food with my sickness, so the food became a conditioned stimulus. And every time I look at that food, I feel sick. I don't like that food. That is conditioned response. So we learn like this. We start associating something with something, and then we learn certain things and we start behaving in a certain manner. This is classical conditioning. On the other hand, operant conditioning, as we just now discussed, is more conscious. For example, John's parent, they give him a new computer at the end of his first year in college because he got good grades. So as a result, his grades continue to get better in the second year too, because he thinks again he will be getting some reward. So it's a conscious, deliberate act of making John learn that if you do something good, you will get a computer, you will get a new mobile phone, and so on. So that is a way of making that person learn that this is a desirable behavior. What I'm trying to emphasize here is that organizations make employees in an organization, they learn in both ways. There are certain things that they will learn consciously, naturally, and there are certain things that you have to make them learn. So there are both classical conditioning as well as operant conditioning learning, which is taking place in organizations on a daily basis. So as I said, that if the boss comes on time, people also try to come on time, because not that the boss told them to come on time, or that there is a conscious effort from the boss, but simply because we observe and we feel that no, because he's punctual, we also have to be punctual. So it is something which is natural. On the other hand, if there is a person who is very punctual and he is rewarded, and there is another person who is not punctual and he is punished, now there is a deliberate effort to make people learn that you have to be punctual, otherwise you will be punished, otherwise you will be if you're punctual you may be rewarded, if you're not punctual you may be punished. So in this case, when you are rewarding people or punishing people, or making them learn something, then that is part of operant conditioning. That is a conscious deliberate act of making people learn. So in business organizations, we have to adopt both perspectives, classical conditioning perspective as well as operant conditioning perspective. There are certain things that people will learn, let them learn. Not everything can be written down, not everything can be told, not everything can be part of a policy. So people will learn naturally. There are certain things that which are not said all the time, they are understood. So for example, even in a classroom, we don't tell you everything, but there are things that you understand yourself, how you have to behave in a class, how you have to interact in a class. It's not that we'll tell you everything, but you know it because you might have sometimes learned about it. But there would be certain things that probably we may make you learn, or we may tell you that this is wrong, you should not do it. So, through some conscious, deliberate attempt, we will try to make you learn that no, this is wrong, don't do it. So, what we are trying to say is that in an organization, employees have to adopt a certain type of behavior, which are called as desirable behaviors. And they will learn about these desirable behaviors both naturally as well as through conscious efforts. If they learn naturally, fine. If they are not able to learn naturally, then we have to make a conscious effort to make them learn what is desirable and what is not desirable, what they have to do and what they should not do. So people have to be made to learn. So both operant as well as classical conditioning perspectives will prevail. Uh, so the first is natural, classical conditioning, where we are not making anybody learn anything consciously, but people are just learning every day. They are observing something and they are naturally learning. So in this kind of learning, not much effort is done by the organization. But in the second, operant conditioning, there is a conscious effort. So let's take a look at what is this conscious effort. How do we shape behavior through operant conditioning? So there's a concept of reinforcement, which has been drawn from the concept of operant conditioning. Reinforcement is a concept of learning which is based on the premise that you can shape behaviors through reinforcement. Through systematic reinforcement, in successive steps, we can shape people's behavior. We can change people's behavior through reinforcement. Now, what do we mean by reinforcement? The reinforcement, what does it mean? As a general term, what does it mean? Can somebody tell me? Reinforcing a behavior. What do we mean by reinforcement? Are you all there?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. I thought I'm alone. Agdas, uh, what is reinforcement? I mean, as a general term, what do you understand by reinforcement?
Like a reward
Reinforce something.
strengthening in
Huh.
ma'am,
Vakas?
to strengthen.
Vakas?
Ma'am, strengthen. To strengthen, ma'am.
Strengthen. Abdul,
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am is ma'am implementing the thing again. Ma'am reinforcing the thing again, ma'am.
Oh, Umama Zahir, you said something. Sorry, encouraging. So what is it? What are you encouraging? How are you? Reinforcement is what? Agdas, you were saying something.
Ma'am re-implementing.
Re-implementing. Reinforcement
Providing support.
provide support. Now, reinforcement is basically a conscious effort, a conscious mechanism that we adopt uh, to ensure that something is repeated or not repeated. So reinforcement is basically to reiterate something or reassert something, so as to pass on a message that this is what has to be done, or this is what should not be done, and so on. So reinforce. Okay, now reinforcing something in order to shape behaviors, reinforcing something in order to make people learn. So, this is what operant conditioning tells us, that we have to reinforce positive behaviors and we have to somehow stop negative behaviors. So, something has to be done as a mechanism of reinforcement to make people repeat good behaviors and to stop them from repeating bad behaviors or negative behaviors or undesirable behavior or detrimental behavior or something which is not good for the organization. So we have to reinforce behaviors. Now, what do we do? What do we do if we want to reinforce behaviors? So the reinforcement theory says that there are several things that we can do. The first thing that you can do is explained through this concept of positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is a very, very simple and the most effective way of making people learn, providing a reward for a desirable behavior. For example, an employee may be rewarded with incentives for completing his target. This is a simple and the most effective way of reinforcing a positive behavior. If an employee has completed his target, we may give him an incentive. Now, what are we doing? What are we doing here? If you give an incentive to an employee, how is it a reinforcement? Sana Fatima,
Yes,
if an
ma'am.
employee completes his target on time and you give that employee a reward, what is this? What message are you giving? How is it a reinforcement? Is it reinforcement of something?
Ma'am, he will be he will get motivated, and for the next time also
All right.
to
So
get the
one
work to
thing,
be done.
okay. So that's simple. So he might be motivated, and the next time again he may try to perform better because he knows there's another reward coming. What else will happen? Is it just one person getting motivated? Is it just a message for one person? It's a message for others also. Others
Yes.
also know. So Kanishka.
Yes, ma'am. Others will also try
So,
to work
right.
better so that they
So,
get reward.
positive reinforcement as a strategy is not just a message for this employee, it's a message for everybody that if you perform better, you will be getting some incentive or you will be getting a better perk or maybe some kind of increment to your salary or some bonus or some performance linked pay or some reward will be there. So, it's a positive reinforcement. It's a positive way of sending a message through a reward that what we value in an organization or what we want in an organization. So if you want people to complete their targets on time, you have to appreciate them, you have to reward them in some way. Now how you reward, that is part of your strategy, but you have to reward. What happens when organizations do not positively reinforce positive behaviors? When they do not positively reinforce positive behaviors, people will be demotivated. Despite the fact that I worked so hard, there is no additional reward, there is no additional incentive, there is no additional appreciation for me. So that will become a demotivator. And we don't want people to be demotivated in an organization. We have to reinforce their positive behaviors. So every time something positive is done, we might give a reward or something to reinforce that positive behavior. What else can we do? Can we do something else? Is there something at the other extreme? If there is a negative behavior, what do we do?
We
Using
may
punishment
punish
as a
those who
negative
are not
response.
completing target.
All right. All right. So there is another strategy which is called as punishment. Punishment is a strategy of applying an undesirable condition to eliminate an undesirable behavior. If something wrong has been done, we might punish that employee. How do organizations punish employees? They may give warnings. Written oral warning is given, then written warning is given, then fines may be there. Sometimes suspension may be there for serious offenses. Sometimes, for even more serious offenses, a person may be fired also, dismissed. These are all ways of punishing a negative behavior. These are all ways of sending a message that a non desirable behavior will not be appreciated. So it's called as punishment. And again, this is sending a message to everybody that if you do this, there will be a negative, thing happening, or there will be a punishment coming, because the organization is not going to tolerate this. So punishments are there. Now, is there something else that can be done apart from rewarding and punishing? Can there be other ways of reinforcement? Okay, so rewards, we call it as positive reinforcement, right? Is punishment a negative reinforcement? Did you get my question? Reward is a positive reinforcement. There's a positive behavior. We positively reinforce it by giving a reward. Is punishment a negative reinforcement? Actually,
No, ma'am.
no. So actually, punishment is punishment. Punishment is actually trying to remove an undesirable behavior by, in a way, sending a message that this behavior will not at all be tolerated. So through fines, or through warnings, or through suspension, or through some kind of demotion or dismissal or whatever, we try to give a very strong message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. So punishment is at the other extreme, just like positive reinforcement is at the one extreme. Now, before, there are other forms of reinforcement also, which I will just now discuss. But let me just tell you about the practical experiences with these two forms of reinforcements. Now, from what you understand, how good are rewards as a positive reinforcement? From whatever you understand, are rewards a good mechanism to positive reinforce a behavior? Is it an effective mechanism? In fact, I just now said that rewards are a very effective mechanism. They are the most popular ways of sending a message that whatever you've done is appreciated, and okay, others may also do the same thing and they will also be appreciated. So rewards are a very good way of sending a positive message. What about punishment? Is punishment a good strategy? Is punishment an effective strategy? Can somebody answer
Yes,
this?
ma'am. Some maybe sometimes.
Sometimes. From whatever you know about business organizations, for example, do business organizations punish employees?
Ma'am, in TCS, I know that if someone is not doing the work properly, they are given the desk job, which is
They are
not,
given.
they are given a desk job kind of a thing where they don't, like for a computer science engineer, if they are not working properly, then they are not given any projects and are given a desk job. So it is kind of a silent punishment.
Okay, is it punishment or what is it? That's
Ma'am, I think,
interesting that you have what you have pointed out. I'll just now discuss that. Is it punishment?
yes, ma'am, like if they are not doing the work, so they are given this kind of a job, so
Okay,
it
okay.
will not
So,
interest
so
them.
all right, I'll come back to what you have said. Now, so punishments are given. They are given by organizations when they feel that something really undesirable is happening. which can hamper the working of the organization, which can impact others also negatively, they do punish. They may punish in various ways. They may punish through warnings or through fines or through demotions or whatever we just now discussed. So punishment is a strategy. Uh, but what has happened is that over years, a lot of research has taken place in this area, and researchers have found that punishment is sometimes indispensable. It has to be done, but it should not be a very frequent strategy, because punishments are something that are unpleasant. We don't like punishments. Even if somebody has done wrong, that person may not like being punished, or others may not like being punished. If a child does something wrong at home, it's not that every time we are going to punish the child. So punishment is not always the only recourse. It's not always the only strategy. There could be other strategies also of sending a message. So, punishment is a very harsh, extreme kind of strategy, which has to be adopted when there is nothing else left to be done. As a last resort, we punish people. But in other cases, researchers and practitioners, over years of research, they have come to the conclusion that punishment should not be a very frequent strategy, because punishment is not liked by people. Punishment is scary. Punishment is insulting also. Punishment is demotivating also sometimes. And in a way, punishment may sometimes, the way punishment is given, may sometimes send a wrong message to others also. So it's not a very good strategy that way. So that means that there should be something else. And what you have said, Kanishka, would probably fall in something else. And what is this something else? So let's see.
Negative reinforcement.
All right, so there are two other strategies which are adopted by organizations. They are called as negative reinforcement and extinction. These are two other strategies that are adopted by business organizations to send a message. Now, negative reinforcement is slightly related to positive reinforcement. It is not punishment. It is slightly related to positive reinforcement. What is this? Removing an unpleasant consequence or an unpleasant situation when a desirable behavior occurs. This is negative reinforcement. Reinforcing something, though it is not positive reinforcement. Now, let's take a look at this example. An employee who was demoted earlier. He was demoted means he was punished. Okay, he was demoted. Demoted means he was brought down one level. So that is a punishment. And maybe he was given that punishment for an offense which was a serious offense. So he was demoted, because demotion is not an everyday practice. It's a very rare punishment. So it means the employee must have done something serious, because that is why he was demoted. Now, let us say that after some time, that employee started behaving nicely, started performing his tasks well, and he started showing good performances. Now, what happens? That for several days and months, you observe that now the employee is performing quite nicely and doing all the work which is assigned and showing positive behavior. What do? You bring him back to the original position from where he was demoted. Now, what are you doing? You are not rewarding him as such, but you are removing an unpleasant consequence or situation in which he was put earlier. Maybe you are removing a punishment or something. And by removing that unpleasant situation, you are again sending a message to that employee as well as other employees that even if you are punished and you perform well and you show good behavior, that punishment will be removed and something good will be done. So he's brought back to his original position. Now, this bringing back to his original position is not technically a reward, but it is a negative reinforcement. So we are removing an unpleasant situation in which that person was. This is also one strategy of making people learn. This is also one strategy of making people adopt a good behavior. Then there is extinction. Extinction is slightly close to punishment, but it is not punishment. Withholding a positive reinforcement to cause cessation of an undesirable behavior. As for example, an employee may not get incentive for not completing target on time. What is this? This is not a reward. This is not a punishment also. It is just withholding for the time being your reward because you have not completed your target. We are withholding your reward, and we are giving you a chance that, okay, if you perform better, we will give you this reward. So you know that, okay, this reward is there for me. If I perform better, it's coming. So it is extinction. You are withholding a positive reinforcement for the time being so as to make that person perform better. And because you want him to do away with something undesirable, he's lazy, he's tardy, he's negligent, he's not working his completing his targets on time. So to remove that undesirable behavior, you are trying to withhold a positive reinforcement for some time. So this is called as an extinction strategy. This is what I believe is similar to what Kanishka you said about that organization, right? So not making an employee work on a critical project for some time, you're withholding a positive reinforcement, and he knows that if he performs better, maybe he'll be brought back in the project and so on. So it is not really a punishment, but it is slightly related to this act of sending a message. So it's not actually a punishment, it's a strategy of extinction, withholding positive reinforcement to cause cessation of an undesirable behavior. So basically, these are four ways of sending messages to people: positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, extinction, and punishment. These are four ways of sending message to people of what they should do, what they should not do, what is desirable, what is not desirable. So these are various types of reinforcement. So both positive and negative reinforcement, they result in learning, they strengthen a response, and they increase probability of it getting repeated. Reinforcement, positive, negative, they are said to be more effective in shaping behavior, I just now said, than punishment or extinction, because punishment is a harsh strategy. Nobody likes being punished. Nobody likes working in an environment where there are too many punishments. So it is not very, you know, pleasant to work in an organization which has too many punishments and too many extinction strategies. It is unsettling. It is not very pleasing. We get unsettled. So it's not a very effective strategy. Extinction and punishment should be adopted only in extreme cases. But positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, they are said to be more effective strategies because anyway they are sending some message through a positive strategy. So researchers have found that they are more effective in sending a message. So positive reinforcement, if you reward somebody, others also want to perform because they know they will also be rewarded. So it's not necessary that you punish people. You reward somebody, and somebody who's a non-performer, he will also get motivated because he will also think that if I perform, I will also get rewarded. So you don't have to always punish non-performers. On the other hand, you can reward the performers, and this rewarding of performers will send a signal. It will send a message to non-performers also that they also have to perform. Are you getting the point? So extinction and punishment are not very pleasant, and so they are not very common strategies. They are not very effective that way. But yes, they are adopted by organizations because many a times harsh messages have to be sent, harsh actions have to be taken. We say organizational behavior is about hard strategies as well as soft strategies. So you have to be, you have to adopt soft, humane approaches. But at the same time, you have to be rational, practical, and you have to adopt hard approaches also. You have to take harsh decisions also. So anyway, so both these strategies, they have to be adopted: positive, negative, extinction, punishment. All of these strategies are adopted, but positive and negative are more effective, and they should be adopted more frequently. In a way, all of these things, they tell us that reinforcement is a way of sending a message to people about what is desirable and what is not desirable. It's a strategy of making people change behavior. So reinforcement is a mechanism of making people change behavior. Now, the question is that how to reinforce, or how many times to reinforce, and when to reinforce, when to reward, when to punish. So this particular aspect called as schedule of reinforcement, it tells us that there has to be a schedule. There has to be a time frame or something to tell us when we have to reward, when we have to punish. So there are two schedules of reinforcement: continuous reinforcement and intermittent reinforcement. Continuous reinforcement schedule says that a desirable behavior should be reinforced each time it is demonstrated. So, for example, each time an employee completes his assignment, he should be rewarded. Continuous. Intermittent reinforcement says that a desired behavior cannot be reinforced each time, but it should be reinforced often enough. What is the logic of this? You should reward employees often enough. What do we mean by this often enough? Intermittent. Continuous reinforcement says every time something desirable happens, you should reward. Is it really so? Do organizations reward people every time something good happens?
No, ma'am.
No. Why? Why? Tell me why. Why you can't reward every time? If you reward every time, it will send an even stronger message. Why can't you reward every time? Why should you not
The
reward every time?
employees will have higher expectations every time they perform any task.
Yes, you may have, employees may have even higher expectations, which might sometimes not be met. We say sometimes we start having an entitlement mentality. I'm entitled to this. We don't want that to happen. That is one reason. The second, more important reason is it is not practical. It is not possible to reward an employee every day and every time. Is it practical? Is it possible? It's not. For example, an organization wants people to be punctual. Okay? We want people to be punctual. Now, is it possible that every day they come on time and every day we give them a reward? Is it possible? It's not possible. That every time they are punctual, you give them a reward. No, that is not practical. But what we can do is once in a month, we can appreciate them. Those employees who have been punctual most of the time, once in a month, we can appreciate them. Or we can have an Employee of the Month award. We can have a Best Employee award, something like this. So, intermittent reinforcement says that you cannot reward employees every time, every day, because that is not practical also. So, it means that you must reward employees, as I said, often. But what is this often? This often is a very loose concept. It doesn't tell you what do we mean by often. So we need to know what is this often. But the fact is that you can't reward employees every day, every time, every second, because he's punctual in every meeting, so you can't reward him for every meeting. But yes, you must reward him. So intermittent reinforcement says that often enough we must send a message to people that what is desirable and what is not desirable, and so we must reward them or have a positive reinforcement or whatever often. So intermittent schedule is more practical, it is more feasible. Now the question is that how often? Now organizations have to decide on this how often. Now this deciding how often is a very difficult question. It will depend on the type of company you are. It will depend on the type of and number of employees you have. It will depend on what kind of business you are into. It will depend on your own business model. It will depend on what work you are assigning to people, what type of teams we have, what culture we have. It will depend on a lot of these things. But yes, you must have an intermittent schedule. You must have some schedule in mind, some plan in mind, some strategy in mind to decide how often you have to reward. So this schedule of reinforcement, it talks about various ways of deciding how often we should reward our employees. So very quickly, I'll discuss this. Intermittent schedules are of two kinds: interval schedule, ratio schedule. So in the previous slide, we discussed that there are two kinds of schedules, continuous and intermittent. Continuous is every time, which is not practical. Intermittent is sometimes, which is more practical, which companies usually adopt. Now, what is this sometimes? For this, you have two schedules, interval schedule and ratio schedule. Interval schedule says that you can decide rewards on the basis of time frames. Once a month, once a week, whatever. Give them some reward. So it's based on time. Ratio schedule says that sometimes you can't decide time and all that, so it is better to reward people on the basis of certain type of behavior, not time but type of behavior, a specific goal, a specific kind of behavior. You reward them. So effort is on the is the basis of rewards, whereas in interval schedule, time is the basis of rewards. So companies which follow an interval schedule, they may reward employees on the basis of time frame. Companies that follow ratio schedule, they may reward employees on the basis of some effort, the type of effort. Now let's see what we mean by this. Interval schedule, the first one, is on the basis of time. Okay, you have to reward people on the basis of time. There are two kinds of schedules which are there: fixed interval, variable interval. Please notice what we are discussing. Fixed interval is a time frame which is fixed. So, okay, we have a strategy. Let's say in my company, I will have a strategy of rewarding employees every week or every month. So, if it is every week, every month, it's a fixed time frame. So, it's a fixed interval schedule. For example, an employee will receive a weekly paycheck. So, first week, you get the paycheck. Second week, if you complete your target, again you get a paycheck. Third week, if you complete your target, again you get a paycheck. Of course, if you don't complete your target, you will not get the paycheck. But it will be every week. So it's a fixed interval schedule. So employees know that every week, these are the number of targets which have been given to us. If we complete these targets, there is some incentive which is coming. Whatever, paycheck or whatever, some incentive is coming. It could be monthly also. Some incentive, some bonus, something is coming every month if I complete my target. So it's a fixed interval schedule. Then we have a variable interval schedule. Variable interval schedule is on the basis of time, but the time is not fixed. So for example, the organization says that you have a chance of earning 2 increments in a year, maybe 6 monthly, provided you do certain things. So employees know that if I do these things and if I complete these targets at least twice a year, I can get some additional bonus, some additional increments. So now what is happening? Again, the increment or reward is based on a time frame, but the time frame is slightly flexible. It's not fixed every month or every week. It is flexible, variable. 2 increments in a year. This example which has been given, you can see the slide, right? The pop quizzes in a classroom. You can see this?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Now there's a professor who says that, okay, next 15 days, any 5 days, I'm going to have a surprise quiz or a surprise test. And students who are present on that day, they will get 5 marks extra in the sessional or whatever. Now, what is the idea that the professor is sending? The professor is sending that next 15 classes, any 5 classes, if you attend any 5 days on these 15 days, you have a chance of getting 5 marks extra just because you are present. Now, what is the message? What is the message that the professor is sending? The professor is sending a message that at least for the next 15 days, you should be present. The students will try to be present at least for the next 15 days because they know that any 5 days, there is a possibility that the professor will have a surprise quiz and 5 marks will be given to everybody who is present. Right? So maybe on day 2 he will do that, maybe on day 4 he will do, maybe day 8 he will do. So he has not told which days, but he has told that next 15 classes, next 15 days. So next 15 days, students will be particularly, attentive, punctual, present in the class because they know at least 5 marks they are going to get additional 5 marks. And those who are absent, they will lose that 5 marks. So this is a variable interval schedule. Organizations also do that. That next year or this year or next 6 months, whatever, we are planning to have a reward scheme, and those employees who attain these targets, we will give them 2 incentives or we will give them something. And so employees know that next 6 months they have a chance of earning 2 increments. When those increments will be given is not told. It is not told, so that round the year people work. All these 15 days at least you are present and attentive and you study and come, whatever. So at least for 15 days, you are motivated because you know that there is a reward. At least for this year, employees are motivated because they know there are 2 increments coming. Again, next year we can do something else. Again, in the next 15 days, we can do something else. So basically, it's a variable interval schedule. It's a reinforcement which is sent on the basis of time, but the time is flexible. It's not fixed. So many a times companies adopt variable interval schedule because it might not be possible to have a fixed interval schedule. Okay, then they go for variable interval. So this is interval schedule. Then you come to the next one, which is ratio schedule. I just now discussed there are two schedules, interval and ratio. Interval is on the basis of time. Ratio is on the basis of effort. How much work you have done, how many goals you have attained, how many desirable things you have done. On the basis of that, we may reward you. Again, here also, just like we had fixed time and variable time, here also we have fixed ratio and variable ratio, two schedules. In fixed ratio, reinforcement is given after a fixed number of responses. It's not time based, it is unit based or target based or fixed number of responses. So in this example, the company says that, for example, these are zipper installers. These are employees who are installing zips on a bag, for example, or on a garment, for example. So the organization says that for every 12 zips that you install, we will give you whatever, an incentive. So it's not on the basis of time, it's on the basis of output, your response. So an employee knows that if today I install only 12 zips, I get one incentive. If I can install 24 zips today, I will get at least 2 incentives. 36, 3 incentives. So the employee will be motivated to perform more and more because the more he performs, the more incentives he is getting. So it is not on the basis of time, it's on the basis of output. Piece rate incentive, you must have studied somewhere. Piece rate, how many units you produce, you get incentive based on that. How many projects you complete, you get incentive based on that. So it's a fixed ratio schedule. And then we have a variable ratio schedule, which says that we will give you an incentive on the basis of your output, but it is not fixed. So in this example, the company says that, okay, for salespeople, the company says we have a new strategy of providing commission. For the next 15 sales that you make, what we'll do is that for the critical sales, depending on the amount or whatever, for some critical sales, we will give you an additional commission. So maybe for the third sale, maybe for the seventh sale, maybe for the 8th sales call, depending on the amount of sale made or whatever, there is some kind of reinforcer which is coming, some kind of commission which is coming, additional commission which is coming, and so on. So here also your reward is linked to your effort, it is linked to your output, but it is not for every output or it is not fixed, it is variable. So again, it's sending a message that the organization wants salespeople to perform better and better. So all these forms of reinforcement, whether interval schedules, time-based schedules, or ratio schedules, which are output-based schedules, they are ways of, or target-based schedules, these are ways of sending messages to people as to what the organization wants them to do. It's a way of reinforcing, it's a way of rewarding and making people understand that if they work in this manner, there is some kind of reward which is coming. So these are different kinds of schedules. So continuous and intermittent. Continuous is not very practical. Intermittent is more practical. Intermittent has two types, based on time and based on unit. So we have a interval and we have a ratio schedule. Again, interval can be fixed or variable. Again, ratio schedule can also be fixed or variable. But these are all different ways of sending reinforcements. Continuous reinforcement, as we said, it's not very practical. It may lead to a lot of expectations, over expectations, early satiation, and as a result of which People may not get motivated, so we don't adopt it very frequently. It's not very practical also. Intermittent is more practical, more logical also. It is more appropriate also for high frequency responses. Within intermittent category, variable schedules lead to higher performance than fixed schedules because variable has an element of surprise. Fixed schedule is fixed time. Every week, something is coming, every month, something is coming. That element of surprise is missing. Whereas in variable, there's an element of surprise. You get a pleasant surprise. Suddenly, you're rewarded. And this element of surprise is something that we all like. So if reward is coming every week, every month, again we get used to it. There is nothing motivating about it. But if it is variable, we like that as I said, element of surprise which is there, and that in a way motivates people even more. There's a certain sense of achievement, a certain sense of pleasure which is attached to that, and so it works even more effectively. So these are different ways of sending reinforcement, sending messages. This 5-step model shows how reinforcement can be used for behavioral modification. So, identify critical behaviors. First, you identify what you want people to do. Then, you develop a baseline data to record that behavior. For example, if you are saying that we will reward you for completing your targets, then you must have something, what are the targets, when those targets will be completed. You must have a system of recording who has completed what targets. You must have a fair system of appraisal. Otherwise, everything will fail. Then identify causes and consequences, why people are performing. If they are not able to attain the targets, what is the problem? Are the targets too unrealistic? Should we change the targets? All that we have to assess. And then apply intervention. If somebody has completed targets on time, give them the reward. And then after giving the reward, the most important thing is evaluate. Did the reward really motivate people? If not, maybe something else has to be done. Maybe the mode of giving reward has to be changed. Maybe the reward itself has to be changed. Maybe the timing has to be changed. Maybe the quantum of reward has to be changed. So we have to see, did it really act as a reinforcer? Is it really leading people to change their behaviors? Is it really motivating people or not? Is it really helping people adopt positive behaviors? Is it really helping people give up negative behaviors? So we have to evaluate also. You just can't keep having reinforcers and not evaluate the effectiveness and efficacy of reinforcers. You have to evaluate the efficacy of your reinforcement strategy to see, is it really working? Are people really getting motivated, and are they really changing their behavior? Because that is the purpose of reinforcement. You want people to change their behavior and adopt behavior which is desirable, which the organization wants them to adopt. So this is what learning primarily is, as a subset of organizational behavior, how learning leads to changes in behavior, what organizations need to do. So certain behaviors we will learn autonomously as the classical conditioning theory. Certain behaviors we have to be consciously, we are made to learn as per the operant conditioning theory. This conscious strategy is called as reinforcement. There are various types of reinforcement: positive, negative, extinction, punishment. Punishment and extinction are not very effective because there is a negativity associated with them. Positive and negative reinforcements are better, so they should be adopted more. Then there is a question of when to reinforce. For that, we have the schedules of reinforcement, continuous and intermittent. Continuous is every time, which is not practical. Intermittent is sometimes, which is more practical. But what do we mean by this sometime? So we must have a schedule for that. It can be a time schedule or a ratio schedule. Time schedule can be fixed time, variable time. Ratio schedule can also be fixed ratio, variable ratio. That is how organizations try to reinforce behaviors. So this was learning. This was reinforcement as a strategy of learning, which is used by organizations to change people's behavior. I will stop here. I'll not continue. We had 2 classes, but I'll not continue now. We'll stop with this. If there's anything that you want to say, let me know. Otherwise, we'll wind up. Because there's a lot of coming in and going out taking place in the meeting, maybe because of internet connectivity or whatever, we are taking attendance twice. Okay, like that, Professor. So we probably will take attendance one somewhere in the beginning of the session and one somewhere towards the end of the session. Zareen, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Once I took,
So I don't know why
yes.
there is so much of this coming in and going out taking place. Maybe there is there could be connectivity issues. I understand there could be connectivity issues. There could be other issues also. Uh, it's okay.
And few students joined in the second class, ma'am, at 12:55. They joined
There
for
could
the
be
first
second.
time.
It's
Yes.
fine. It's fine. It's absolutely
Yes,
fine.
yes.
That is why we are taking attendance twice so that we can
Right,
account
ma'am.
for all those things. So we will try to ensure that at least we have two attendances for each session. Although you will be given one attendance only, but at least we will have to screen grabs so that we can see who was present, who was not, and so on. We can't do beyond that. But anyway, so we'll have a record of this. Okay. So I think we can close now. If there's anything that anybody wants to ask, let me know. Otherwise, we'll close. Now, what we'll do is we have completed a number of topics now. So what we can do is in the next class, maybe we can take up some case study. Okay, Zareen, is that okay?
जी मैम बिल्कुल sure.
Take up a case study based on all these topics that we have discussed, so that at least you also get to know what are the practical underpinnings of these issues. So what we will do is we will share a case study or a news item with you on your WhatsApp group, and we'll let you know that what is the purpose of this case study or news item, and you please read that case, and maybe on Friday we have a shorter class, so it'll be good to take up. We can take up a case study on Friday. So if we post something on your group, please read that, and then we will take it up for discussion on Friday. And there will be a positive reinforcement. We'll have some marks for that. Okay, that will be part of your assessment. So we'll keep some marks for that. So we'll discuss in the class, and then maybe after that you can submit a written evaluation of your own analysis of the case, right? Is that okay?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we wind up now?